Well, thanks for joining me in this edition of the Brian Sussman Show. And of course, I am Brian Sussman. Here's the question: why are so many people, especially those under the age of 40, so okay with socialism, communism, and Marxism? Why has the entire Democrat Party and their platform become 100% neo Marxist? How is it that all of the institutions of America now are pulling levers that are pro socialist and communist and Marxist and flat out getting away with it? How can we better sell freedom, free markets, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? In this podcast, you're going to meet Chris Talgo. Chris is a pretty sharp guy who's co-written a book called Socialism at a Glance. He's also with the Heartland Institute, a wonderful organization that has been out there championing freedom and speaking out against the climate agenda. So with that in mind, I think you're going to find our discussion freewheeling. We cover a lot of ground, and I hope that you'll take the time to not just like this episode, but more importantly, share it with others. Appreciate you. Now, let's get to the interview with Chris Talgo. Where did you develop this interest in socialism and warning people about the evils of socialism?
Well, I'd say really it goes back to just lots of reading. When I was a kid and, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I was always just trying to read more and learn more about all types of governing systems, why they work, why they don't work. When I was in college, I got a little bit of indoctrination into socialism, communism, and how it's the greatest thing, but just hasn't been done properly yet. And what I chose to do was I chose to say, okay, well, I want to learn about this. I want to learn about this in real depth. So I went and I read so many books about it. I read books, from Marx, just and all throughout, the history of socialism and communism. And I think that really just prepared me to understand it in in a holistic manner, warts and all. And that's really, how I've, tried to understand it.
It's amazing the indoctrination process, and you've written quite a bit about this, but this indoctrination process is outrageous. It begins now in the very earliest of schooling years for kids, doesn't it?
Yeah, that was another big shocker for me. So when I was in college, it was the early 2000s, and I saw, some of this starting to happen, and I, pushed back a little bit, and we had some great debates, and it was much more of a, free expression. You say your side, I say my side. We have a just good, robust debate about it. But what I realized was when I started teaching high school, this was in about 2008 or so. Um, I went into my student teaching and did a bunch of observations in very good high schools in the northern Chicago suburbs, and I was completely shocked as to how the teachers were not teaching the students about world history and communism and Marxism and all that. They were trying to convince them and persuade them that it was a good thing and that it should be done here. And that to me was just such an eye opener. I was like, wow, you're not teaching them, hey, during the Soviet Union, all these people got murdered and died from, the mass starvation, or, in communist China, the Great Leap Forward and all the destruction that wrought. It was, yeah, they did a pretty good job, but if we just make some tweaks here and there, we can make it really, really good. And they were trying to force feed that into the brains of these vulnerable kids who really don't know any better.
Mhm.
And that really just kind of, like rubbed me the wrong way. And, the more that I, taught and then became a, full-time teacher and moved down to South Carolina and started teaching in a public school environment, I was just shocked and dismayed how, when it came to teaching of American government, world history, and even US history, everything was so warped as to make free market capitalism terrible and socialism, Marxism, communism this great, great idea that just hasn't been implemented properly yet. And the facts, the history just simply does not support that. Not to mention the fact that communism, socialism, Marxism is anti-human for so many reasons. So to me, that was really just a big eye opener for me.
I'm curious, by the way, what schools did you teach at or school did you teach at in the northern suburbs of the Chicago area?
So I'm from Northfield, Illinois, and I went to New Trier High School, and I
Okay.
graduated New Trier in the late 1990s. When I was
Okay.
there, it was still a great school. We were a Time Magazine, I think, #1 rated public school for
Yeah.
for a year or so. And when I went back about 7 years later, it was like it was a completely different place. I could not believe that the teachers who were my so-called master teachers were trying to convince me to convince the students that communism, socialism, and collectivism in general is a great thing, and that free market capitalism, as practiced in America, is literally an evil idea.
So I went to Blumberg South High School.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so it's in that same kind of group of schools, but that was many years ago. So I'm just curious, when you were teaching, if you're teaching US history in one of these schools and you decide to teach it properly and allow people to understand what our system of government is all about, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the ownership of property. If you were allowed to go down that road, would they let you? Or did you have to maintain their standards and their editorial position, so to speak?
So that is a great question, and here is the tricky answer to that. In order to make sure that I received my teaching certification and that I was able to graduate from my teaching college and to pass my student teaching, time period, I had to kind of toe the line a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, I tried to push back as much as I could, and I tried to always say, guys, I'm going to give you both points of view on this and let you decide, because that was, ultimately what I think teachers are supposed to do. Give both sides of an argument and let the kids decide. But there were several times when the master teacher, I could tell, was no, 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 no. We don't want you to give them that side of
Wow.
of the equation. We only want you to talk about how free market capitalism, is great for the 1% and the wealthy, and it's oppressive and all this terrible stuff. But then when I would say, but that's not true, and look at how, in the United States of America, we're the land of opportunity, and if you go and you've got a good work ethic, you can achieve the American dream, and it's happened for hundreds of years. And Andrew Carnegie was a really, poor, immigrant who came and started this awesome steel business. It was no, it was all terrible, and he took advantage of everybody, and everything he did was terrible. And it's just like, no, the facts do not support that. So yeah, unfortunately, I did have to kind of make sure that I didn't go too far to that end. But I will tell you this, once I was a certified teacher and once I got a full-time teaching position in South Carolina, I took it upon myself to say, you know what? No, I am going to really just give them nothing but the truth. And I think a lot of the students really appreciated that because they would come and tell me that after the fact. They would come and say, this other teacher, she's, or here she is saying this, and that, but you're saying this, and this other thing. And I'm pretty sure that you're right and they're wrong. And I would just always tell them, you know what? It's not about me being right or them being wrong. It's about going and learning more on your own. And I would explain to them there are so many great books you can go read about this stuff, whether it's the Black Book of Communism or just tons of them. If you're interested and really want to learn about the facts about this stuff, the resources are out there. But it's really incumbent upon them to go and do the research. But at the same time, I totally understand that these are kids. They've got sports, they've got friends, they've got
Sure.
dances, they've got part-time jobs. They don't have the time or the wherewithal to go and do that. So what I tried to do was just tell them, guys, I'm just going to give you nothing but the truth. And you can go and do with that whatever you want.
We've come to a place where in the developed world, socialism is being accepted, as you've pointed out, and it's being mainstreamed. And probably a lot of that is because of the educational process, but it's to the point now where we have people in Congress who, like AOC, she's treated like a rock star. She's so popular with
Yeah.
so many millions of people. And she's so open about her socialist beliefs. So it's no longer just a Bernie Sanders. We have lots of these people in Congress now. And to me, that's chilling. I'm sure you would agree.
I think it's very chilling. So in 2016, when Bernie Sanders really started to get some attention for, being a democratic socialist and for proposing some of these more socialistic ideas in the United States, I was shocked. But I'll tell you one thing. The reason why I think that he did catch on is because in the past 20, 30, 40 years, we've actually moved away from those free market fundamentals. And
Mhm.
I think that people in my generation in particular, they see 2008, they see the bank bailouts, they see big government saying, okay, we'll take care of you, but not you, and all this crony capitalism stuff.
Mhm.
And then they think to themselves, that's capitalism. And I'm trying to say, no, 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 that's called crony capitalism. That is not called free market capitalism. Free market capitalism is the complete opposite of that, actually. Free market capitalism is everyone has the opportunity. If you go and you invent a product or a service and provide a service to people that they want, they will reward you for doing that. So I think that some of them are confused because the past 20 years or so with the growth of government and with like you said, the indoctrination in the public school system in particular, they've gotten just such a misguided sense of
Yeah.
free market capitalism versus socialism. So some of them I think are vulnerable to that as a solution because they feel that, hey, right now the economy is not working. Free market capitalism has let me down. And really, what I think what we need to do is say we need to return to the roots of free market capitalism because that is how you will get ahead. That is how you will achieve the American dream. And
Right.
we need to really embrace that.
And and here's the problem. There's so much regulation now, so much heavy-handed government regulation that to get back to that that original purpose of free market capitalism, it's very difficult now because of the regulation, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this goes back to when I was, teaching and we one of the units that I found most interesting was when we talked about the quote unquote robber barons, the Gilded Age. And that to me was always such an interesting time to teach them about because it was, hey, post Civil War America, we were really developing, we're really industrializing, we're really growing, and some of those antiquated European nations are kind of on the decline. And why did people like Andrew Carnegie? Why did people like John Rockefeller? Why did all they how did they get so wealthy? It wasn't because they just put their hand out and said, "Give me money." You know why? It's because they understood there's a niche that I can fill, whether it's the Bessemer steel process with Carnegie, or whether it's John D. Rockefeller saying, I think this oil thing is really going to catch on someday, and producing these companies that provided services that the people and products that the people wanted, and they
Yes.
were rewarded for that. And the fact that we have, after the fact, a century or so later said, no, 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 they were actually the robber barons and they just took advantage of everybody. That's just simply not true. So it's really just how you frame these things. And I think that that is a powerful message to send. And I think one of the things that I tried to do was say, hey guys, look at Steve Jobs. He started Apple in a garage. Look at Jeff Bezos. He started Amazon selling books out of his garage. That mentality is still alive and well. You can still do it, but I fear that it's more difficult in today's day and age with all these government regulations, like you said, the taxes, the this. You have to have a license for that. You have to get you get it to permission to do things.
Right.
Back in the day, the greatest part of America was the fact that you could go and you could start something and you could grow it and you could become a multi-millionaire wealthy but beyond your wildest dreams. And one more thing about the so-called Gilded Age and those evil robber barons. Last time I checked, what they did at the end of their time on this earth was they said, we've accumulated this money, now we want to give it back. So
Yes.
Rockefeller Center, Carnegie Hall, the libraries, the awesome things that they've provided, that was not provided by government. That was provided by these people who said, you know what? America has been great to us. The system has been great to us. We want to give back to the system. You don't ever get that with, communism,
No.
collectivism, socialism, or Marxism. So I think that that is just a really powerful argument in favor of free market capitalism, which was alive and well in, the late 1800s, early 1900s, and just slowly but surely we've kind of, moved away from that.
It's interesting. America and our ingenuity, the wonderful technology that's come from this country has benefited the entire world. But I also really like what you're saying here about charity. When you look at all of the charity, all of the largesse that's gone to good works around the world, that's where the United States of America has changed the world through its charity. And that's
Absolutely.
something that is the result of, free market capitalism.
Just think of this. Whenever there's a natural disaster or something around the world, who is the first country to go there and provide
Right.
the needed materials and resources? The
Yeah.
United States of America. Was it the Soviet Union? I don't think so. Was it communist China? Don't think so. Was it communist Cuba? Don't think so.
Yeah.
They are almost entirely concerned with repressing their population and just trying to extract as much as they can from their economies. The United States is completely different. We want to go and we want to expand free market capitalism around this world so that they can have the opportunities that we have.
Let's talk about diversity. Let's talk about the race card, because this is a weapon that's being employed by the left to really market and push socialism. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I call that neo-Marxism. And really what happened was, Marx in the, late 1800s thought to himself, okay, it's all about economic us versus them, rich versus poor, bourgeoisie versus proletariat. He was right on that, but that was limited. And what happened was, and this is a lot from the Frankfurt School and the Progressive Era, and it's just gone on and on, Herbert Marcuse, and so on and so forth, to DEI today, where they've said, okay, that was a good argument, but an even better argument is if we just pit one against another on all these different facets, whether it's race, whether it's gender, or just anything.
Mhm.
And what they're trying to do is they're trying to say there's a victim and there's an oppressor. And if you're the victim, well, then it's not your fault. You're totally blameless. And the reason why you're not as successful as you want to be, or whatever it is, money or, whatever, it's not your fault. It's because someone else is oppressing you. And that is just not true. And I think that, for many Americans, they're starting to see through this. They really are. And I think they're starting to say, wait a second, you can't keep playing that same old race card. When during Donald Trump's presidency, what happened to Black Americans' wages? They went up, they skyrocketed. Because that shows you that free market capitalism doesn't care what color your skin is, doesn't care what your gender is, doesn't care even what your ideology is. All that it cares about is, can you provide a good or a service that the people want? And it will reward you if you can do that in a manner in which the people desire.
Isn't it also interesting now we have a Democrat Party, and at times, there were the sprinklings of socialism, communism, the Bernie Sanders, as we mentioned earlier. But now it's that well, you look at their platform. The entire platform may as well have been written by a Karl Marx,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
there's no room for those wonderful inalienable rights that we cherish so well, unless you take those inalienable rights and twist and turn them and warp them. But the Democrat Party now is the Socialist Party, right?
Oh, without a doubt. When President Biden was campaigning to be the Democratic nominee, he had to appease the Bernie Sanders crowd. And he did that by coming up with this joint task force guidelines. And it was, I mean, I remember reading through it. I mean, it was a very thick document, a couple hundred pages. And it basically was saying, okay, we are going to do everything Bernie wants, but we're going to do it in a sleight of hand way. And we're not going to really, say we're out and out doing it, but we're just
Right.
going to do it behind the scenes. And, unfortunately, they have accomplished many of that, especially on the climate agenda.
Yeah.
And that definitely worries me. And it makes me sad because I remember when Bill Clinton made his speech about the era of big government's over. We had welfare reform. It seemed like we had all come together and said, you know what? We won the Cold War. We're the good guys. Our system is the best. Let's go all in on it.
Hmm.
And then 2 decades later, I'm shaking my head going, what just happened? The bad guys lost. We won, but now we're the bad guys, and now the communist Chinese are the ones who were saying, let's be more like them.
Right.
It's everything is just so backwards. But yeah, I do agree with you completely that the Democrat Party in its current iteration is the party of socialism.
Hmm. You mentioned climate, obviously. That's my wheelhouse. But it is the perfect vehicle in many ways for them to really drive this socialism slash communism agenda, isn't it?
Absolutely. And they've been using it for many years. I guess I was in high school when Al Gore came out with The Inconvenient Truth. And here we are now, all these years later, everything he said has not come to fruition. All the apocalyptic predictions have not come true, yet we're still listening to these people. And like you said, it's a guise, it's a Trojan horse for socialism because what they're saying is you can't have choices, you can't buy the kind of car you want, you have to do what we say that you do. And you can't have, air conditioning, when you want it, or you can't have the dishwasher that you want or the electric appliance, whatever it is.
Right.
No, you get what the government says you're going to get. And here's my fear for the long term is that that's going to then begin rationing because hey, you know what? We need to make sure that we have enough energy to make these big data centers, make sure that they're doing their thing. So you, John Smith in, middle America, you don't need to have your AC on in the summer. What's wrong with you?
Right.
That is a very scary proposition. If we get to the point where they say, you know what, we now control the grid, we control how much energy you're allowed to use, your energy footprint,
Hmm.
and whether or not that leads to a social credit score, the ESG stuff. I mean, this is just, I think we're just still in the infancy of this. And I think what we're trying to do, and I know what you're trying to do, is we're trying to nip it in the bud,
Hmm.
but we are working against a very powerful set of institutions. The capture that the climate change alarmists have amongst academia, Hollywood, the public institutions, the government, the bureaucracy is so deep. And we need to really push back against that because I think that most Americans in their bones realize, you know what? We cannot be the United States of America as we've been if we go down this road. And you look at Germany, my mother came from Germany. We still have family there. And when we have to hear that, yeah, you know what, this green agenda that we went on, in the late 1990s now means that we can't even have streetlights on in the cities of, Munich. That to me is just so shocking.
Wow.
So why are we doubling down on a failed, ideology? Because it's not based on science. We know that. When we've seen the fact that it's failing across Europe and it's failing here in our backyards. So that to me is so symbolic of the Marxist attitude of the ideology is above all else, beyond the results. Who cares? Keep pushing the ideology.
One of the things I've attempted to unpack, and I do this in my current book, and I know you're up to speed on all of this, but most people aren't. The climate agenda also has a social justice component and a
Hmm.
social equity component.
Yep.
How, linking those, you have to do all sorts of mental gymnastics, really, to
Oh yeah.
combine all of those. But somehow these people pushing this agenda are able to get away with it. It's crazy, isn't it?
It is crazy. The fact that they have associated these nebulous social justice causes with environmentalism is just like it's beyond the pale. Another thing that I always say is I feel like I did grow up in, in somewhat normal times. I remember on Earth Day, you know what we did at my little school? We would go and maybe plant some trees one year. I think another year we went and we picked up litter. You don't see any of that. So where are the environmentalists when it comes to actually caring about the environment?
Right.
Because where I live in the Chicagoland area, there's litter all over the place. the city of Chicago, I can't even go there anymore. It's just, it's just so disgusting.
Right.
Yet these are the same people who are saying, be like us. And you look at New York City, you look at San Francisco, the places where this is really taking hold, and they're saying, we want you to live like we do. And I think the vast majority of Americans are saying, no, 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 we don't want to live like that.
Yeah.
Stop trying to force us to live like that. And you're right. They absolutely use the race card. They use the social justice card. This whole thing about roads are racist. It's just it is so crazy how they are trying to tie everything, no matter how far away it is, to climate change. But they keep trying.
Yeah, they keep pushing it. And again, as you mentioned earlier, they have so many institutions working in sync to push this message. Talk to me about this youngest generation, the up and coming generation. These are the kids now in junior high and they're in high school. This the climate agenda is interdisciplinary. The socialist agenda is interdisciplinary. So talk to me about that generation and their acceptance of all of this, because that's the generation that's scaring me, Chris. I'm thinking when I'm an old man pushing around a walker, they're going to be in charge.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could give you some hope, but unfortunately, when I was teaching, I remember going to some of the earth science, teachers and just asking them, why are you pushing the climate change narrative when you're supposed to be talking about astronomy or like that kind of thing? And what they always said was, and they held true to this, no matter what, is this is an existential threat. We need to make sure that they understand that. And I know that it's not an existential threat. I know that the Earth has been warming and cooling throughout its, hundreds of millions, billions of years.
Right.
It probably has nothing to do with, man-made, reasons or all this stuff, but they don't care about that. What they're trying to do is produce a new generation of social justice warriors, and unfortunately, they are succeeding in that because when you look at polls, when you look at, young kids, do you want to have a family? No, climate change is going to ruin the world. I don't want to have a family. Okay, that's really, sad. Do you want to live in a free country with, free market capitalism? No, no, America's terrible. We want to live like China. They've got it right. So it makes me worried that these children are being just brainwashed, but I do have some hope that once they get into the real world and they start experiencing life and they start seeing, wow, my energy bills just skyrocketed
Right.
50%, or they're,
Right.
they're telling me I can't have my AC or I can't charge my phone or whatever it is, that maybe they'll change their mind. I hope. But,
Yes.
that's something that's going to take a concerted effort. And it's going to take a concerted effort, especially among their parents. Because when they are going to the public schools, I can guarantee you that they are not getting a proper education.
Yeah.
So their parents just need to teach them. And I'm very fortunate that my dad in particular said, always told us, his children, go and learn on your own. Go
Mhm.
and research this stuff. Don't just take anyone's, point. Go and learn about it on your own. I really hope that, especially with all the information that's now available with, the internet and all this stuff, that they don't even have to do what I did, where I would go and look up an encyclopedia, back in the day and that kind of stuff. It's all at their fingertips.
Yeah.
And if they can access it, and if the social media companies will stop suppressing the truth,
Yeah.
which is a huge, huge problem, then I do think that we could probably have a generational, change here. But like you, I am worried about the future too.
There is a real concern that what we're seeing on the internet is being filtered, it's being scrubbed. It's harder to get the truth as you just described these days, because all of your first subjects that will come up in a query will be pushing this leftist narrative. Did you write an
Yes.
article about that?
Well, yeah, because I'm very, very worried about the social media censorship that's been happening, since, geez, 2015, 2016 now. And it just seems like it's getting worse and worse and
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, just for example, I mean, if you just, Google, because that's how most people get their information nowadays, like it or not, they
Right.
Google stuff. And when
Yeah.
they Google, climate change, is it real? Maybe if they go to page 7, they'll get a source that says, maybe it's not real, maybe it's,
Yeah.
a hoax, but
Yeah.
no one goes to page 7. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing with socialism. And it's the same thing with when I do lots of research and, I'll Google stuff, constantly, and I know better than to trust the first couple pages of results. But unfortunately, American teenagers don't. So they
Right.
take that and they look at those first 10 results and go, well, that must be like the
Gotta be
truth.
it. Yeah.
Exactly. And Google's algorithm obviously, puts things that they want the kids to see up on the results pages higher. Social media, we got the same problem. And then even in the public schools, when it comes to textbooks, I can't believe that when it came to teaching AP US history, they were using a book that was so incredibly slanted. It was Howard Zinn's, A History of America for Young People, and it was just straight indoctrination. And I'm just like, guys, can you please at least give them the other side of this?
Wow. Wow.
So no, it just seems like and I'm sure there's actually I did check Howard Zinn's website has a whole curriculum now devoted to this. So yeah, the technology in a
Mhm.
way has had a deleterious effect because it makes it easier for them to say this is what we want you to see. Versus back when I guess when I was a kid, I could go to the library and I could just check out books and I could go read the encyclopedia, and the encyclopedia was pretty neutral. So yeah, you're right that the technological environment for today's kids especially is dangerous because it's not giving them both sides of the story, and it's skewing the results that they want them to see, and that is not good.
We've talked about your book, Socialism at a Glance, indirectly, but let's talk about it specifically. Uh, I love the book because it is at a glance. It's not a lengthy read, but I think it's completely thorough. And if you would have written a book that's, 300 or 400 pages, which you easily could have done, fewer people are likely to read it. But that's what I love about this book. It's readable and you really unpack what socialism, communism, Marxism is all about. So take a moment to talk to us about this book.
Yeah, so first of all, like you said, it's sometimes I think it's more difficult to write a shorter book or a shorter piece than it is to write a longer piece because
I think I think Mark Twain was the guy who said that. He once
and it's
said, if I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time, or something like that.
and it's completely true. And my co-author Jack McFerrin, he's he works at Harlan as well. He's a research fellow, and when we were coming up with like how we wanted to frame all this and what we wanted to present, what we wanted to do is we wanted to tell a story. And I think that when I was teaching, that was the best way for me to get
Yes.
through to students.
Yes.
So instead of just saying, here's all the facts and here's this the history and all this stuff, I wanted to just try to explain to them, okay, in the mid 1800s, this thing started gaining momentum called socialism. And then I try to explain to them what it is, why it started to gain momentum. And then we asked the question, is this compatible with human nature? And the answer to that is no. And here's why. Because in every place it's been tried, they've said we need to create a new man, the new Soviet man, the new Cuban man, because they know deep down that their ideology is not compatible with humanity's affinity to want to be free. So
Yeah.
we go and cover that. Then we do cover the some of Marx's writings and the Communist Manifesto, and just outline like, look, this is what they said. This is not me saying this.
Mhm.
This is them saying this, and just go through that. And some of that stuff I think is difficult for adolescents to understand. So we tried to break it down and we tried to explain it to them, in reasonable, understandable terms. And then we do go into some of the history, and we did this, in a way in which we wanted to try to explain to them this is not a one-off. This is not like the Soviet Union was the only time and it just didn't work, but
Right.
that was just the way it, went. It was no. Soviet Union, Communist China, Cuba. There are so many examples. North
Oh yeah.
Korea, Nazi Germany. I
Yeah.
know another huge one because everyone, this is, I'm sorry, just real quick, a pet peeve of mine is when they describe Nazi Germany as being far right. That is just completely not true. They were the
And boy,
National
that's
Socialist
such an
Workers' Party.
accepted, it's such an accepted narrative.
Yes,
Or they'll
yes,
say they were fascist.
yes.
And that term's also been completely twisted around. But continue because you're spot on here.
Right, right. And I mean, so we kind of dive into some of Hitler's writings and some of his speeches where he's saying, "Yeah, I love all this communism stuff, but I don't want it to happen at a worldwide level. I want it to happen just, in Germany first." So he was saying, "Yeah, I agree with them on all that stuff, but I just don't want to, I'm not as concerned with the Communist International, as much as I am with, really making like this German socialism
Right.
like the way to go." So I think that was a really important point, and then we just keep explaining to them that in every instance it has been tried, every single time it has resulted in death, poverty, despair, famine, families being upended, and just pain and suffering. And we try to
So
do that by giving them just examples of that. So it's not just, hey, they kind of messed up and 100 million people just starved to death.
yeah.
It was no, actually, in many instances, they wanted to do that. And they wanted to do that for, for sick, disgusting, evil reasons. And that is part and parcel to communism, socialism.
It's frightening to think how you could see something like this being implemented in America for all those who are, conservative, ultra conservative, religious conservative. They may have to institute at some point in time if they gain, all the levers of control, they would have to put together re-education camps. So
Hmm.
they'd want to try re-educate us, just like they've done in communist countries. But then, Chris, I ask people this question all the time, and I'll just ask you. So, what do you do with the people that are unable to be re-educated? What are you going to do with them? Stick them in prison? Exterminate them? I mean, when you start going down that road, it gets really frightening really fast.
What I find most frightening is that talk has already been happening. I remember Katie Couric talking about deprogramming Trump supporters. I know Hillary Clinton has.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Oh, Hillary Clinton has made many similar statements. So
Hmm.
this is kind of like actually like avant-garde, like new, new ideas on today's, crazy socialist like left.
Hmm.
Because I think that once again, and I think this is really important to understand, they know that their policies and their ideology does not work.
Yeah.
So they need to browbeat. They need to they can't persuade. They need to indoctrinate and brainwash people into accepting their way of life and their governing philosophy. Because once again, and this is so important, it is not compatible with human nature. And I think that deep down they do know that. And
Yeah.
that's why I think that they are so militant about how you cannot speak out about this. You cannot have an alternative opinion. You cannot question any of our edicts and any of our, climate, decrees.
Hmm.
But that's healthy. That's
Yeah.
how we get to the truth,
Yeah.
And especially during COVID, I still can't believe how many Americans just went along with all this stuff and just never asked the question of, are you sure about this? And now
Right.
we know 4 years later that they were making this all up as they went along.
Yeah.
Um, and I hope that there's still enough freedom-loving Americans in this country to say we don't want anything to do with this, and really just put it to bed.
Well, this is what I love about the Heartland Institute, and this is what I like about your writings and your book. You, you are essentially, we are essentially helping people rediscover the beauties of freedom. And I think when we enlighten them to what real freedom is all about, they'll start to see how we're being so regulated and so coaxed to move in a particular direction. Like with COVID, I think that was a perfect example that you brought forward. Um, I, to me, that's the key here. I mean, we're giving a message of hope. Yeah, there's some gloom and doom here, but we're trying to prevent that from taking place or going any further. It's really a message of hope that we have, isn't it?
It unquestionably is a message of hope. It's a message of believe in yourself and you can do whatever you want. You can be whatever you want. And one of the things that the socialist, communist, Marxist, new left is doing is they're trying to prey upon people's insecurity.
Hmm.
And one of them is, I think, financial, economic insecurity. And they're just saying, don't worry, a UBI or more SNAP, more
Right.
food stamp benefits, that will solve everything.
Yeah.
And no, that won't solve everything. That's just going to make people more dependent on government.
Hmm.
And that is no way to live a life. You aren't free. You aren't able to, go and pursue your dreams if you just think to yourself, well, I'll just get my UBI and just,
Right.
just kind of just barely make it, through life. I think that most people have desires that far outweigh that just getting by mentality that the modern Democrat Party is trying to say, that's what we can provide for you. We'll provide security. Security and liberty cannot coexist in some ways. And Benjamin Franklin said that. And he's right.
Yes.
Because when you have liberty, guess what? You might fail. You might fail 20 times. But that's okay because you learn from your failures and you learn and you become a better person. I
Mhm.
failed so many times in my life and I'm so grateful for those
Yes.
failures because failure is what makes you a better person. And if you want to create a society in which nobody fails, everyone's the same, everyone gets a trophy, it's just all that stuff that's been
Yeah.
happening for the past, few decades, you're going to get a society that is just not a, robust, thriving, ingenuity, innovation sparking, world leading society. You're going to get a very just, milk toast society. And that's what they want. And
Yeah.
I want nothing to do with that
Yeah. The
personally.
milk toast society with the elites at the top, right? They'll
Yep.
have everything that they need. They'll
Yep.
keep us down here out of the way, uh,
Yeah,
which
they'll
is in
fly on their
keeping.
private jets while we are
Sure.
forced to, live in 15-minute cities and just, yeah, the hypocrisy is just
Yeah.
outrageous.
Marx, you've read so much of Marx's stuff, and I have as well. In my opinion, Marx hated humans. Your
Yes.
thoughts on that?
I could not agree more. The whole depopulation, degrowth movement, I've been, really writing about this recently because I think it is just it is disgusting how people are saying you shouldn't have kids. You don't need to have a large family. Whether or not even they connect that to abortion or not. But I mean, I was watching something today, and abortion is pretty tied to these communist countries. Last time I checked, communist China did a whole lot of abortions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, it is a dehuman, just gross ideology in which they just try to make everyone a cog in this greater, the machine that they're developing. People don't want to be a cog in a machine. People want to go and do things and
Yeah.
take risks and, and live life.
How do you think the WEF plays into this? I wrote about this extensively in Climate Cult, but I'm just one guy. I want to hear what somebody else has to say. Where's the World Economic Forum and all this from your point of view?
Oh, well, we think that the World Economic Forum are the primary drivers of a lot of this stuff. It's a lot of this I do think is tied to the whole globalization, globalism movement, whether it's United Nations, WEF, and just all these supranational governing bodies saying, the United States, you guys have it really well, so we need to go with some global wealth redistribution, like all that kind of stuff. I mean, I just reject that in full because I think the best way to do it is to say, and especially on the energy thing, because right now the WF, as you know, is saying these developing countries, they don't need gas, they don't need coal, they don't need, natural gas, they need they need solar and wind. But you and I know that solar and wind is not scalable, it's unreliable, it's undependable, it's unaffordable. It'll keep these people in poverty. If you want to uplift the billions of people who are still stuck in poverty, I think 3 billion people still live on 250 a day. You know what you do? You go to them and you say, here is unharnessed energy, and that will transform their economies instantly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the World Economic Forum does not want to do that. They want this great transition to a, net zero economy in which, I mean, it is just so crazy to think that they are trying to tell the rest of the world, we want you to go backwards in time. We want you to go back a couple hundred years before we had these, the advent of fossil fuels and all the great, technologies that have, come from them and all the products and all the, just amazing things. We want you to go back a couple hundred years, but not us. We will
Right.
continue to live and we will continue to have these, swanky soirees in Davos while we're, eating, $100, Kobe steak, but you got to eat bugs,
Yeah.
and you can't drive a car and so I do think that the rest of the world is starting to become attuned to the hypocrisy because I remember 25 years ago when I first started kind of following this stuff, I was like, oh, the WF, they're just a kind of bunch of wonky guys who just kind of maybe want to like tinker a little bit with the economy. Geez, in 25 years, they have exploded into this, like James Bond supervillain where there's
Yeah.
like, no, we want to take over the world and we want to force you to live how we want you to live and wealth redistribution. And it's basically like global communism.
Yeah. 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 With a smiley face.
Yes. Yeah.
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 With a
With a
smiley
smiley
face.
face. You mentioned 15-minute cities. I think this is it's fascinating in a frightening way, but not only are we moving to have all the infrastructure in place for these 15-minute cities, but I think there's a large number of people who are really excited about all this. Talk to me about the 15-minute city.
Well, I think part of that is that they want to keep us packed in these dense urban environments because it's much easier to control people when they are closely packed in
Mhm.
those dense urban environments rather than if they're living suburban or rural. Okay.
Yeah.
So first of all, one of the best things about America is the car culture. 1950s, post World War II America, the car boom, then you could get in your car and you could go drive across the country and you can, go to work in a city, but drive home and still have a really nice little, suburban, existence. They hate that. They
Yeah.
detest that. They want to get rid of it. They
Yeah.
are declaring war on American mobility. So if they get rid of, the gasoline powered car and the internal combustion engine and say, sorry, all you got left is public transportation and electric vehicles, I think that that would be a huge benefit for them to harness people into these like packed, dense, almost tenement-like
Right.
existences, in the early 1900s, because it's so much easier for them to control us
Right.
if that is the way that it's going to be. And the fact that they are planning these 15-minute cities where don't worry, you won't even have to leave like the 3 block radius. Everything will just be brought to you. People don't want to live like that.
Yeah.
Some people want to go and experience nature and they want to be, away from, others and they want to live a, more rural existence. But that is not in line with their ideology. So therefore, they're going to try to do everything they can to blunt that.
As you look at the powers that be around the world, who's the biggest threat to America? Is it China? Is it Russia? Is it who is it? Who do we have to worry about the most,
Well,
in your opinion?
I would say for me right now, it's we're our own worst enemy. And I am sad to say that, but I think a lot of what we are dealing with now is self-induced. Whether it's this huge national debt, whether it's our terrible energy policy, whether even it's our terrible border policy, crime, and all that stuff. I think a lot of that's self-induced. But I think the good news is a lot of that can be turned around. On the international level, I mean, I do think that China's our main adversary. I am worried that they're going to try to invade Taiwan, maybe in the next, few months. And if they were to do so, that would cause a global economic shock because that means that the Taiwan Semiconductor Corporation, which produces 92% of all semiconductors for the entire world,
Hmm.
would be under China's power.
Wow.
And that would be a huge, huge problem
Mhm.
for the rest of the world because, and this goes back to all the climate stuff. Past, couple of decades, we have outsourced so much manufacturing because of the climate regulations, and we can't do this because, oh no, it might, hurt a butterfly's habitat or whatever. And now we're so dependent on countries like China, and we saw this during the pandemic. If they say, well, sorry, we're not going to supply you what you need, to get along every day, well, then what are we going to do?
Right.
So I think that, one of the big things is, and this is, I think, a direct reflection of the crazy climate agenda, is we need to bring back a lot of this, manufacturing prowess back to the United States. And I think that that would also reinvigorate our middle class, because our middle
Yes.
class has been hollowed out. And without a strong middle class, I think that the United States is not going to be on firm footing for quite a while.
Yeah. You're right. And this could all be changed through economic policy. What is it that these socialists and communists, not just domestically, but around the world, what is it that they fear about a Donald Trump presidency?
Hmm. That's a great question. Um, I think they fear the fact that he will stand up to them. I think that they fear the fact that he will be an unabashed supporter of America first. And I don't know why, but for some reason, being pro-America and being America first is a naughty, nasty
Right.
thing these days,
Yeah.
which that should be
Yeah. Even
what
in
we've
America, it's a
right.
nasty thing. Right.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like it's just so backwards.
Yeah.
Of course we should put our country first. Germany puts their country first. Russia puts their country first. Every country is going to do that.
Right.
So I think that they fear that if Donald Trump does get reelected, that he will come back into office. He will get us out of Paris, the Paris Climate Accords again, and he
Mhm.
will say, you know what, we are going to become energy dominant like we never have before, because that we've got so many resources
Yeah.
under our feet, whether it's natural gas, oil. I mean, it is just incredible. And if he were to say, we don't need to depend on you, Saudi Arabia, we don't need to depend on you, Middle East anymore. We're just going to, depend on ourselves. We're
Right.
going to export natural gas to Europe. So they don't have to worry about Vladimir Putin and whether or not he's going to, cut off their natural gas supply. I think that that in and of itself would be a total game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be a game changer. And it would put the bad guys in check. I think it'd be a beautiful thing. And I also
Yep.
like what you're saying. Let's invigorate the middle class in America by bringing manufacturing back. We're so enriching the communists in China with these trade agreements. It's pretty bizarre how all this came about and came about so quickly, Chris.
And I would say deliberately.
Yeah.
And a strong middle class is a bulwark against communism, because then you've got like a big, large cohort of the people who are saying, "Wait a second, life is good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I might not be the wealthiest of the wealthiest, but I'm
Right.
I'm able to get ahead, and like
Yeah.
the next generation is probably going to be even better." What they want to do is they want to create this vast underclass of people who are dependent upon them, and they want to have that rich versus poor dynamic existing. And the best part of that, I think one of the best parts of the Trump administration is the fact that the middle and lower class Americans made more money than their wages rose faster than those people at the very top. And that to me is so great. And under Joe Biden with his crazy inflation, the total opposite has happened. Wealth inequality has been worse under Joe Biden, and it narrowed under Donald Trump. And that goes to show free market capitalism is the solution, and all this big government socialistic policies is the problem.
You get the final word. I want you to tell people about the Heartland Institute. I'm a big fan. Spoke at a conference some years ago, and so this is your opportunity to pitch Heartland Institute.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, as you know, we are one of the few think tanks in this country that really goes headfirst into the whole climate realism agenda. Our mission is very simple: free market solutions to social and economic problems. And I am proud to work here. And I just, I hope that we're making a difference. And I hope that the American people will benefit, from all the hard work that we're doing. And that's why we're doing it. Yep.
Chris, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate all this time from you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Total pleasure.
Cool. Well, thank you for taking the time to listen to or watch the Brian Sussman Show podcast with my guest, Chris Talgo. Please make sure you like, and more importantly, make sure you share this with someone, because I think what Chris had to say is not only informative, but enlightening and equipping, because we want to expose their war on life, liberty, and property. Thanks for joining me, my friends. God bless you. Until next time.